Well, that was a nice introduction. I was sitting here trying to think why it wasn't me on drums on that. And the reason is you're going to get enough of me for the next 30 minutes, and I hope you'll stay with me. I've been asked to hit a couple of points, topics that might be interesting to some of you and boring to others, but this is it, folks. One of the things is, how did I get into this music, and how did I want to play jazz? And the answer is growing up in a musical family. My mother and two older sisters, piano students, and the middle sister, Anne, played saxophone and upright bass in high school bands and orchestras. And we just grew up with music in the house. There were big band records in the house, so I was acquainted with those things from that era. And that was really my introduction into swing and music, and then later realized it was really jazz. So we would sing, we would gather around the home style Hammond organ and sing songs that came in songbooks. My mother would get these sacred songbook suggestions in the mail, and in the back of it would be a popular songbook with Jada and Elmer's Tune and Take the A Train and whatnot. So I was learning the standards at 5 years old before I knew I was learning the Great American Songbook. I actually learned the keyboard by lying on the floor, and she was telling me to push the bass pedals of the organ. Press that 4 times. That's C. Now count up 4. That's F. Now press that 4 times. So that's how I learned the keyboard initially. Then I was told I needed to take piano lessons because everybody was going to play piano in our family except my father, who was a very good athlete, and he played center field. So I followed suit and had the same piano teacher my mother and her sisters had. And the piano teacher finally said, after about 6 months, I was 5, and she said, he doesn't like this. He doesn't like the instrument. He has good rhythmic ability. He needs to play some kind of instrument, but not the piano. So she let me quit. So when people ask me, do you play other instruments? I said, yes, I started piano at 5 and quit at 5:30. I'm not waiting for you. So thanks to Peter Nero for that line. So the interest in music was still there. I was listening to a lot of music, and my parents bought me a Sears toy drum set that I kept immaculate and proved to them that I wasn't going to break the paper heads, and I really wanted to play the drums. So at 8 years old, I was allowed to get a rental snare drum from Hood Music in Richmond, Indiana, and I got the opportunity to be in summer band, the 5th and 6th grade summer band when I was 8 years old. The same band director had my sister, so he took a chance on me that I might have some rhythmic or musical ability also. So I got in the summer band, and afterwards he said he needs to have private lessons. So I got connected to my rudimental snare drum guru, John McMahon in Richmond, Indiana, who later then moved to Anderson, Indiana, and did the same thing there, built the whole marching band drum lines in that area. And at that time, traditional grip was the only grip you could play. He wouldn't stand for anything else because you couldn't be in the band if you didn't match up with all the other snare drummers playing traditional grip, which for those of you who don't know, you hold the stick like this and the right stick is like this. So the goal was to make the marching band snare line as a sophomore in high school. So if you could do that, you could about run for mayor in the city. It was a big deal. So that was my goal. Well, he wouldn't award you, the teacher wouldn't award you a drum set until you won a contest. And I couldn't enter a contest until I was 12. So I got a first place in the contest. Then I got a drum set, and I thought, well, these hands are happening, but whose feet are these under me? I had no technique with how to use my feet. And it took a while I'm still working on it, as a matter of fact, to try to get the feet to where the hands are. So then I could really delve all the way into jazz, and I was playing to records. At 10 years old, I was playing to Oscar Peterson trio records with the Ray Brown and Ed Thigpen and Count Basie record. My dad bought a Count Basie record for like 79 cents at a variety store. It was a variety store that it was a cutout. So I loved that. And so I just kind of gravitated toward that music, and I never really got into the music of my generation. I liked Ramsey Lewis, The In Crowd, and, but I never really got into the pop tunes too much of what my generation was. And I knew them, and my friends understood me, and we hung out a lot, but they kind of left me alone when it came to jazz, and understood, because I was succeeding at getting first chair or getting a good rating at the next contest. So I realized that I asked my teacher, I said, I could make a living doing this, right? And he said, yeah, but you have to be the best. So that stuck. And oddly enough, the first time I had this conversation with Oscar Peterson, he said his father didn't want him to be a piano player. He says, but I'll let you be a piano player if you're the best. And I thought, wow, okay, we have that in common. So we've got to strive for being the best from these people early on in our lives. So following the music that I love just kind of directed me through. I was in concert band and orchestra, and continuing snare drum lessons and marimba lessons and timpani lessons, because my teacher wanted me to go to music school when I wanted to go on a band bus. I was ready to hit a band bus when I was 15, a jazz big band bus I'm talking about. So I just kept following the love of the music. Well, when I was 15, I got the offer to be in the Earlham College Jazz Ensemble. They didn't have any jazz drummers there. So the director, Donald Chan, came over and said, you have anybody who wants to play drums? And my band director said, take this kid out of my hair. He's driving me crazy, and I don't know anything about jazz to start a band. John Parshall, the great band director I had at Richmond. So I went over and I played in the college band. It was all Buddy Rich charts, which I had memorized because I loved Buddy Rich's band at the time. And with all the snare drum technique, I really had come up through the technical snare drum route of getting to where I wanted, based on, when I was also 5 years old, seeing Gene Krupa on television. I said, I got to do that. Tried to slick my hair back, white shirt, black tie, black suit, and tried to be Gene Krupa for a couple of years. And of course, it's ridiculous. You got to be yourself. It's great to have people that look up to and want to be like, but there's only one of everybody. So nobody can sound like anybody else. So I gave that up finally after I failed miserably at trying to be Buddy Rich in the Earlham College band, and auditioned at Eastman School of Music and was accepted as one of the 4 freshmen that year. I auditioned for the great John Beck, the teacher there, the professor. I didn't have enough money to go there. And so they said, you're being put on the waiting list for next year. Okay, now what am I going to do? So my band director and school administrator, Glenn Johnston, had a contact at Indiana University, and they set up an audition for me the first week of August. That would be my freshman year. Well, marching band started the second week. So I got in because he remembered being adjudicator at one of the contests. Richard Johnson was who auditioned me, the late Richard Johnson, professor at IU. So he said, we'll get you in, but you have to be in marching band. And I went, oh man, I've had so much marching band in high school. Really? So I was another body in the marching band for 2 years at Indiana University, just so I could get into school. I went for 2 years. I didn't make a jazz ensemble my first semester, and 52 percussion majors. Peter Erskine was in the top band. We were freshmen together. Ken Aronoff, the great drummer, was there. We had a lot of people there. And I met John Clayton, who had been influenced by Ray Brown and told he should go to Indiana to learn how to handle the arco on the bass, to play with the bow better, from the great teacher Murray Grodner. So that's where I met John Clayton. And this is a lesson for those of you who think, oh, this isn't turning out the way I want to. Well, if I'd gone to Eastman School of Music, what would have happened to me? We don't know. Maybe I would have been an orchestral player after all. I wouldn't have met John Clayton. We wouldn't have formed the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra. I wouldn't have gone on the Monty Alexander Trio with John Clayton, and so many other things. John Clayton became my best friend in 1972. And had I not gone to Indiana, I may not have had the chance to meet him when he came from Venice, California, to go to IU. So things work out for a reason. Always keep that in mind. No matter what your career is or what your goals are, you can really want something badly, but it's best the way it's going to turn out is going to be the best, and you can handle that. So obviously it was the best for me for that to happen. So going through all of the career moves are based on relationships that you make along the way. John called me. I dropped out of Indiana after 2 years because I knew I wanted to. I did make a jazz band in Indiana, actually, my second semester, and I was in for a year and a half in the jazz bands. It was great. We got to play Thad Jones charts, Oliver Nelson, Basie charts. So it was right up my alley, and that's what I wanted to do. And I had 4 goals, and I talked to John about this. He said, "Who do you want to play with?" And I said, "Woody Herman, Ray Brown, Oscar Peterson," and no particular order at the time, Oscar Peterson and Count Basie Orchestra. And he looked at me, he said, "Then you will." John's only 1 year older than me, but he was a lot wiser than me at the time. And I said, "Well, how do I do that?" And he said, "How many Oscar Peterson records do you have?" And I said, 8. He said, "You need 308. How many Woody Herman?" I said, "Okay, got it." So I skipped school the next couple of days, and I went to the discount record store in Bloomington, Indiana, and I bought every record of all those artists that I could find, and I just started memorizing all their music and then playing along to them, transcribing some things. I even transcribed Ed Thigpen's left hand and right foot through an entire piece of music for 3 pieces of music with Oscar Peterson. So I learned from that what not to do mostly, and get some musicianship in your drumming and not just play the drums, play and serve the music. So your friendships and your connections through the years are strong relationships that are going to keep surfacing. The trombone player on the Tommy Dorsey band was on Woody Herman's band, Birch Johnson. And I let him know I was ready to go on Woody's band whenever they had an opening. 2 weeks later, I was on Woody Herman's band. On the Tommy Dorsey band, Dennis Wilson, trombone player, who was Lionel Hampton's music director. He subbed for our trombone player and my college roommate, Don Mickelson. And Dennis Wilson leaned down and looked at me and he said, "I got to get you on Lionel Hampton's band." I was on Lionel Hampton's band from that. So all the networking stuff, and especially with social media now, I'm not sure that's always the best way to get where you want to go. The relationships you make with people and keep those, that's going to get you through most of your life if you're friends with these people and you have the same musical goals and same thoughts of how to do whatever area you're in. And I've had so many friends from such a long time. My college roommate called me yesterday. He lives in Santa Barbara now, and we're still in touch. The bass player in the first band I was in, Chuck Nineker, we talk at least 3 times a month, and he lives out here playing movie music. He's in the studios a lot. So those kind of relationships will carry you through and open the next door for you. And as it turned out, I was offered the opportunity and was fortunate enough to be able to play with the 4 goals that I had: Ray Brown, Oscar Peterson, Woody Herman, and the Count Basie Orchestra. And all those happened because of relationships and being able to stay in touch with people and them remembering, yeah, he had something here that I don't hear from somebody else, and you remember that about them. And that is actually your networking without really networking. So I would encourage you to do that. The second thing I would say is you never know who's in the room when you're playing. Always play your butt off. Every time you pick up your instrument, John Clayton always says it's no longer the practice room when you're practicing. It's now the performance room. Act like you're 100%. You got one shot to keep the gig and nail that thing you're working on, instead of spending 3 and 4 hours trying to get it and not really maybe focusing for that whole time. There's a certain amount of muscle memory you have to build up, I think, for technique when you're younger. Yes, you do need to spend more time on it then for stamina and concentration. But if you want to learn a piece of music quickly, concentrate on it, focus, and nothing else can enter your mind, and you get it done in 2 or 3 minutes or 5 minutes or however long you want to do it. My good friend Matt Wilson said that he had his wife Felicia set an egg timer upstairs, and he went downstairs in the basement and he said, "Okay, I got to write this tune in 3 minutes." And so she knocked on the door when the timer was finished, and he had the song written. So I think maybe there's a sense of urgency that needs to come into this too, of how badly do we want this? How serious are we about this? And just don't waste time. You know, another thing that was important to me was my father and my drum teacher that I mentioned both said the same thing to me. I'm going to tell you this one time. Don't make me tell you again. And it wasn't mean-spirited. It was, I know you're smarter than this. You know, you don't have to keep asking me questions, the same thing over and over. And that's one of the things that musicians have said about me that they appreciate is, oh, you remember that from last time. Wow, thanks. How does it go? So a lot of times, especially if like Ray Brown was on the bandstand announcing a tune, and you get caught up in the announcement, and you put the microphone, and he says, what's the introduction of this? And I find myself doing the same thing. You're in microphone mode, and I'll say, how does this start? You know, and I wrote the thing. So, you know, that's, even though it's in there, sometimes you can't recall it on the spot. So those things are important, I think, in being successful in whatever you want to do. Is don't make people keep telling you that you're doing the wrong thing, or that you forgot to do the right thing, and they get tired of that. And be quick at learning things. Don't make them wait on you while they're trying to teach you a figure. So good gratitude day to you. Hello from Detroit. Oh, okay. Glad to hear you. Recorded with Ramsey Lewis. Well, aren't you the fortunate one? Wow. First time I played Chicago with Monty Alexander and John Clayton, we played the back room on Rush Street for a month. That's when location work was plentiful. Now you're lucky to get one night anywhere, but it was a whole month that you were set up there. We stayed down the street at the end of Rush Street on the Maryland Hotel for $11 a day. Had to sleep with one eye open and keep stamping out things on the floor, but it was $11 a day. And before us was L.D. Young and Red Holt, who had been Ramsey Lewis's rhythm section. And then Judy Roberts, the great Judy Roberts, came in after we did. So great. Great that you got to play with Ramsey, and he's still a powerhouse. He's still out doing it. He's a road warrior. So going on from another point was, what did I learn from elders who were musicians that I worked with? And there's so much that I think those things just become you and your personality, because they're helping you form who you are and the way you play, by pulling you aside, saying, maybe you don't want to do this. You know, you might want to try this. On the other hand, when Ray Brown hired me, I was on Woody Herman's band. We did 3 records in January of '78. The Road Father, direct a disc, Flip and Woody together, which was with Flip Phillips, and then Chick Donald Walter Woodrow. Chick Corea wrote a suite for half of the record, and then we did Steely Dan tunes on the other half, and it was nominated for a Grammy. That was my last date with Woody in '77. And then, of course, later on, I went to sub anytime there were drummer issues, and I'd go out for a couple of weeks or so, about 13 or 14, 15 more times. So when I got off Woody's band, Ray had invited me to join the LA4. The drum chair had been vacated by Shelly Mann, and they both had talked about me being the drummer. So I go in and I do the first rehearsal, and I'm a real big believer of homework. You know, if you're going to play with somebody, learn their music, learn everything about them. You know, the more you know going into the job, then the better prepared you are. So I've transcribed most of what Shelly did on all these LA4 recordings with Bud Shank and Lorendo Almeida. That was the rest of the quartet. So I go in and I play the first rehearsal, and after the first melody that we play, Ray stops the rehearsal, which is in his office on Vine and Yucca in Hollywood, heart of Hollywood. So he stops the rehearsal. I go, uh-oh. He's got his arm around the bass like this, and he says, so we know what Shelly Mann sounded like on this music. We hired you to hear what you're going to do with it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm 24 years old. These guys are twice my age. What do I have to bring to this music? And immediately it started me thinking, that's what they hired me for. I got to find out what I have to offer this music. And he said, we'll tell you if it's not working, but don't be afraid to be you and play you in this group. Well, okay. So one of the first things I did, we want you to write one of those new things you guys are playing. I said, well, I don't really play a lot of new things. Like you're talking about funk beats and, fusion and, it's 1978. So it was heavy fusion time. I said, I don't really, he says, yeah, what's that Chick Corea tune at Spain? Why don't you write that? And I went, okay, I'll do the best I can, so I arranged it. Now I'd only arranged for drum line at this point in marching band. So I was really, trying to figure out how to do this, learn the range of all the instruments, which wasn't very successful after all. So I take the arrangement in, and Ray is playing it down, and it was hard. Everybody's first arrangement's too hard, as everybody out there knows who's ever written anything. It's like you overwrite, and you think, man, this is going to knock him out, So Ray drops out about halfway through the tune, and I thought, uh-oh. I look over at him, and he stops the band. He says, Hammer, come here. I go over to him. He's got, again, the arm around the bass. He puts his other arm around me, and he says, look at letter D. I said, okay. He says, what's that note on the downbeat? And I said, it's a low D. And he goes, yeah. Do you know what my lowest note is? I went, E. He said, yeah, I'm good, but I'm not that good. And so the whole room cracked up, and it was a very valuable lesson, but he lovingly told me that note wasn't on his instrument. so those kind of life lessons through the elders are what I've been blessed with and fortunate enough to receive information from them about what it is that we all love to do and the common goal of serving the music. I also learned from Ray mostly, and others I played with, but from Ray, he really drove home the fact that we need to play to make everyone in the group sound as good as they possibly can, and maybe even better than they think they can sound. Maybe you can do something that they're not aware of that will make them elevate their musicianship and their artistry, and they haven't thought of that. But if they get with the right rhythm section, and we've got what we got going, then that's, they may. One night Bud Shank took 28 choruses on something up here, ding 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 ding, and Ray and I were dying, and later Ray said, but did you like that? And Bud says, well, yeah. And he says, I thought so. You took 28 choruses, so we played to make Bud sound good, and he was just like, hey, this feels so good, I'm going to keep blowing, So you try to play with, no, you don't try. You play to help everyone in the band sound as good as they possibly can. What do they need at this time? What can I supply at this time to help them? And I expect that in return. When I play with a high school band, and I'll say, I'm playing to make you guys sound like $1 million. Do the same for me. Make me look good. And I'm playing with you in mind. I've got all your parts covered. I'm going to hand you everything you need. I'm going to set everything up in hand. You don't even have to count, and you don't have to read the music. That's what I have in mind when I'm playing with you. So I'd like for you to do the same for me. So those are some of the important things from the elders. Of course, there were, it's gotten a little kind in the jam sessions. I remember playing, and a trumpet has, for those of you who aren't musicians, a Harmon Mute is a metal mute on the end of a trumpet. Miles Davis had a popular sound that he borrowed from Harry Sweets Edison, and others, of course, used it. But there was a Harmon trumpet mute flying by the drums right by my head one night at a jam session, and it wasn't aimed at me, but I saw it go by, and I thought, yikes! And I hope I'm doing everything right. So we've got a little kind with letting people get up on the bandstand, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're not playing. They're only practicing on your time, and I don't mind some of that tough love on the bandstand. I think that helps create the musician to know what they're supposed to do and what they're not supposed to do, and then they can bring themselves into that area and know where they stand, and they can still be themselves. But there are rules to abide by. So Otherwise, you can't be free from anything if you don't have the rules to be free musically with what you want to do. Jeffrey Clayton, our dear departed friend and co-leader in the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra, had one of the greatest lines about transcribing or not transcribing. John and Jeff and I were giving a clinic years ago, and we're all big transcribers. You know, you revisit them, and it's like seeing old friends. Oh, there's Shelly Manne, there's Jimmy Cobb, there's Max Roach. And I remember when I did this at 18 years old, and, you know, this is a great feeling to revisit those things. So this one student was arguing with Jeff, not arguing, just disagreeing with him and letting it be known that he didn't think transcribing was important. If you just listen, that's all you need, and you get it. Because he didn't want to sound like anybody was the answer. And Jeff said, well, isn't it better to sound like a somebody than a nobody for a while? And it's true. And like I said at the very beginning of this thing, you can't sound like anybody else. You can borrow ideas from people, but there's no way that you can sound like another musician, no matter how hard you try. And if you keep trying, you're going to get laughed at because you're going to be a bad imitation of that person and that player. So words of wisdom like that are so, they're pearls of wisdom. If we're smart enough to listen to people about what we can avoid, because they've already been there, so they can let us know that you don't have to go through this, you know, what we went through. So those are just a couple of nuggets. Dancers, I loved playing for dancers. Big bands, that's what big bands were for in the first place. In the music, they were the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, you know, the Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, Jimmy Lunsford Band, Chick Webb. If you didn't have dancers on the dance floor, if you were a big band then you weren't called the next week for the job. They got somebody else who could keep the dancers on the floor. Now, what keeps the dancers on the floor? Is it the second alto player or the third trombone player? And I'm not putting them down. But what do dancers dance to? They dance to the beat. So have we lost a little danceability in our cymbal beat when we're playing as jazz drummers? And sometimes I feel like we go toward the creative side of it so much, and we just want to create. And rhythmically, it's difficult and it's exciting, but I'm always keeping a dancer in the back of my mind. And this occurred one night when I was on the Basie band, and Freddie Green and I are walking in to the fourth dance in a row, which means a 4-hour gig. And then you get on the bus, you write 8 hours or so to the next 4-hour gig, and so on. So we had 4 in a row. So we're walking in, and I said, another dance tonight, huh, Freddie? And he says, you don't like dances? I said, no, I do, but this is 4 of them in a row. And the 2-hour concerts, we get to play some different tempos, and, you know, I can blow a little bit solo, and it's kind of fun to break it up. He said, give me a dance any old time. And I said, what do you like so much about dances? He said, in the first 8 bars of the first tune, I look out on the dance floor and I find me the couple I'm going to stay with the rest of the night. Many times they've got better time than anybody in the band, and I want to keep them on the dance floor. Ever since that, he said, that gig will go by tonight in 45 minutes if you do that. And it did. 4 hours went by like nothing. So I think keeping dancing in your mind when you're playing is really important. If you think about it, every rhythm goes with a dance. The samba, Afro-Cuban beats, waltzes. I mean, everything goes with a beat. So I think we need to think about people dancing, even though we're not playing dance music for people, but the beat should have that danceability in it to make people want to get up and dance, even though they're listening to you. How's this affecting them? I think the beat should be prominent in what you're offering to the listener. Mel Lewis said, be confident about your beat, offer it to the band, and then offer it to the audience. Don't make everybody swing. Don't try to make them come into what you're doing. Be confident in what you do and offer it to everyone else in the room and invite them. And some people won't want to come into your invitation, and it's okay for one night. But then you've got to start surrounding yourself with people who want to be invited into that, and in turn they should be inviting you into what they're doing. And that's all under the heading of serving the music and playing to make everyone sound as good as they possibly can. So one of the things that is passing before my very eyes is a project that John Clayton and Bruce Foreman and I did, and we're going to be at the Monterey Festival coming up in September on the 23rd. Our Heroes did a record, and it was the group was called the Poll Winners because they won the jazz polls every year. So I'm not sure who decided they should do a record, but let's get a record of these 3 poll winners. And they made a series of records that was called the Poll Winners: Ray Brown, Barney Kessel, and Shelly Manne. And so Bruce Foreman headed up this project, found Barney's car, drove in his car to Denver to get Barney's guitar that he purchased from a collector. John has Ray Brown's bass, and we borrowed Gary Hobbs' drum set that was Shelly Manne's leady drums, and he so graciously let me use them for the recording session. So we used those exact instruments for the recording, and we didn't try to copy what the record did, but we tried to use the same concept of being in the same room and just calling tunes. Very little music was written down. And here's the background for this. Here's the introduction. Let's do a couple of takes and go on to the next one. So that record got some notice toward the end of last year and the beginning of this year. So we've got some things coming up. Other projects were, I did a Christmas CD. I've been threatening to do one for 20 years. And so I did one. I had enough time during the pandemic and put it together and started sending ideas to the pianist for 22 years in the trio and in the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra, Tamir Hindelman, and John Hamer, who has been in the both the trio and the big band for 3 years. And we just started sending ideas back and forth on what tunes we wanted to do. And oddly enough, of all the CDs I've done as a leader, this one got more streaming or hits or whatever you want to call it than anything I've ever done. So why did it take me 20 years to get this done? If I'd known that, I probably would have jumped on it a little early. But you never know in this business what people are gonna like. So might be volume 2 coming up. You never know. Bright and Merry, volume 2. So the trio is thinking about doing another CD. We're overdue. I think everybody's overdue from the pandemic. But what the pandemic afforded me was I had two back surgeries, lower back surgeries that were needed. I was losing some feeling in my left foot and all the way down to the foot from the hip down. And so I spent a lot of time listening to Nat Cole in 1945 and 7 hours listening all the time and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I think you'll find out what I was listening to and what the accumulated knowledge from listening to all those great things were on a next trio performance. Also, I'm still working a lot with Akiko Saruga. So that, along with the great honor of being a co-leader in the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra from 1986 or something, we had a concert Saturday night. So those are the things I'm involved in of late. So I just want to thank everyone for being a part of this. And I think my time is probably up. So thanks for joining me and listening to me quack a little bit about what's gone on the past, 100 years. So take care, everybody. Thank you very much.